5 states are currently navigating complex legal and financial landscapes that can impact senior homeowners' equity by $4,000 or even significantly more every single year. For many individuals who have spent 3 or 4 decades diligently paying off a mortgage, the home represents the pinnacle of their financial security. However, a series of procedural mechanisms, administrative fees, and obscure state statutes are creating a situation where that equity is being diminished, often without the homeowner's full realization until a legal notice or a substantial bill arrives. This phenomenon is not a standard property tax in the traditional sense. Rather, it is a structured system of equity management and transfer that has operated for generations. While a landmark Supreme Court ruling in 2023 addressed the most extreme versions of equity forfeiture, the underlying machinery remains active in every county across these 5 specific states. In several jurisdictions, new legislative updates and economic shifts mean the financial exposure for seniors is actually increasing this year. The fundamental issue is that while your deed carries your name and your mortgage may be zero, the rules governing how much of that home's value stays in your pocket are not always found in clear federal laws. Instead, they are buried in county-level tax codes and state statutes that were often drafted before the current generation of retirees was even born. In the 5 states we are analyzing today, these laws still permit government entities or private investors to walk away with tens of thousands of dollars in equity that was built over a lifetime of labor. There is a specific filing available in nearly every county or town office, typically costing under $75, that acts as a primary defense against the most aggressive forms of this mechanism. Before we detail that filing, it is crucial to understand the legal environment in these states and why seniors with significant home equity are the primary demographic affected by these rules. These regulations do not typically prioritize struggling homeowners with low-value properties. Instead, they often impact those who have the most equity to lose. Consequently, the seniors who have done everything right, paying their bills and maintaining their homes, often stand in front of the largest potential financial losses. The modern understanding of this issue began with a case that exposed the entire legal mechanism to the highest court in the land. Geraldine Tyler, a 94-year-old widow, owned a 1-bedroom condominium in Hennepin County, Minnesota. After moving into a senior living community, she fell behind on her property taxes. The total amount owed, including all accumulated penalties and interest, was approximately $15,000. Under the existing Minnesota statutes at the time, Hennepin County seized the condominium, sold it at auction for $40,000, and retained every cent of the proceeds. Geraldine Tyler received nothing, no refund, no check for the difference, and no recognition of the $25,000 in equity she had built over the years. The county argued this was entirely legal, asserting that once a homeowner falls behind on taxes, they forfeit the entire property and all associated value to the state. For years, courts in Minnesota and several other states supported this logic, suggesting that the government's right to collect taxes superseded the individual's right to their remaining equity. This meant that if a home was worth $500,000 and the owner owed a mere $10,000 in taxes, the state could theoretically take the entire $500,000 asset. I am Nancy, and you are watching Golden Seniors Hub. Geraldine Tyler decided to challenge this practice, and her case eventually reached the United States Supreme Court. In May of 2023, the court ruled unanimously in Tyler v. Hennepin County that this specific practice violated the Takings Clause of the Fifth Amendment. The justices clarified that while the government has the right to sell a property to collect unpaid taxes, it does not have the right to keep the surplus equity. Taking $25,000 of equity to satisfy a $15,000 debt was, in the court's view, unconstitutional. However, many people stopped reading the news after that initial headline and missed the more complicated reality that followed. The Supreme Court did not invalidate the property tax sale process itself. It only ruled that the surplus value must be returned to the former owner. This means the seizure can still occur, the auction can still go forward, and the home can still be lost. The only functional change is that the county is now required to mail the former owner a check for what is left over. This is where the $4,000 equity loss becomes a common occurrence. In Minnesota and the other states on our list, the rules regarding how that surplus is calculated, who receives notification, and how much time one has to claim the funds are still being defined. Some counties now charge administrative fees ranging from 15% to 25% to handle the surplus. Others require a separate formal court filing to claim the money, often with a deadline as short as 90 days. If a senior misses that window, the surplus can still revert to the government. Thus, while the federal court ended absolute equity theft, it did not end equity loss through procedural traps. In Minnesota, the state amended its tax forfeit statutes in 2024 to comply with the Tyler ruling. While surplus funds are now technically held for the owner, the claim process is far from automatic. The notice of these funds is sent to the address on file, which is often problematic for seniors in assisted living or for estates in probate. If the notice goes to an empty house and the deadline passes, the equity remains with the state. This demonstrates a pattern across all 5 states. The front door of absolute forfeiture was closed by the court, but the side door of procedural fees and missed deadlines remains wide open. In Nebraska, the system utilizes a tax certificate mechanism that has historically been quite rigorous. Private investors can purchase a tax lien on a property and, after a 3-year period, file for a tax deed to transfer the property title. While the homeowner can redeem the property during those 3 years by paying the back taxes, they must also pay a statutory interest rate that often reaches 14%. A small tax debt can quickly balloon, and if the redemption window closes, the financial consequences are severe. Post-Tyler, Nebraska has updated its procedures to ensure surplus equity is returned, but the certificate sale process remains active. The $4,000 figure is particularly relevant here because Nebraska statutes allow the county and the investor to deduct recoverable costs from the surplus. These costs include legal fees, title search expenses, recording fees, and the interest accrued during the redemption period. In many Nebraska counties, these deductions average between $3,500 and $4,500 per case. For a senior who might be owed $20,000 in equity, receiving only $16,000 represents a significant loss that can impact their ability to afford long-term care or housing. The Supreme Court ruling does not prohibit these reasonable administrative fees, making them a standard part of the process. The best defense in Nebraska is informational. The state requires multiple notices, but they are often written in dense legal terminology that many people mistake for junk mail. A licensed real estate attorney in Nebraska can typically review these notices in a very short consultation, often preventing a much larger loss. Nebraska also offers a specific filing called a homestead exemption for those over 65 with limited income. This can reduce the assessed value of the home or even defer tax payments, yet many eligible seniors do not utilize it simply because they are unaware it exists. In 2026, the filing window for this exemption typically closes on June 30th, making it a time-sensitive priority. Moving to New Jersey, the challenges are amplified by the fact that the state often has the highest property tax rates in the nation. For a senior who has successfully paid off their mortgage, the annual tax bill remains their largest single expense, sometimes even surpassing healthcare costs. When a senior in a high-tax county like Bergen or Essex falls behind, the interest rates on delinquent taxes can reach 18%, coupled with a 6% penalty. Within 3 years, a $5,000 debt can double. New Jersey also utilizes an abandonment doctrine that allows municipalities to accelerate foreclosure on properties deemed vacant. If a senior moves to a care facility and the home sits empty for 90 days, the redemption window can be compressed from 2 years down to just 45 days. In these cases, the equity loss through legal fees and penalties almost always exceeds $4,000. New Jersey homeowners should look into the Senior Freeze program, which reimburses eligible seniors for property tax increases. However, this requires an annual application, And missing a single year can reset the tax base to a much higher level because the senior must pay the full tax amount upfront and wait for a state reimbursement. The program can be difficult for those on a very tight fixed income. New for 2026, the Stay NJ program is being rolled out, aiming to cut property taxes in half for many seniors. But the application process is rigorous and requires verifying income and residency through systems like ID.me, which can be a barrier for some. In Illinois, particularly in Cook County, the tax sale system has historically been one of the most aggressive in the country. Before the 2023 ruling, investors could acquire tax certificates and eventually full deeds, often resulting in homeowners losing hundreds of thousands in equity over relatively small debts. While Illinois has rewritten its code to mandate surplus returns, the new laws allow for the recovery of collection costs and attorney fees that frequently total between $3,800 and $5,200. The primary protection in Illinois is the senior citizen's homestead exemption, which reduces the equalized assessed value of the property. There is also a senior citizens real estate tax deferral program that allows qualified seniors to defer their taxes at a low interest rate, which is then settled when the property is sold or transferred. This prevents the senior from ever entering a tax sale in the first place, yet it is often underpublicized. In Cook County, homeowners must often re-verify their exemptions annually, and if the paperwork is not returned by the spring deadline, the tax bill can spike by thousands of dollars overnight. The Illinois Deferral Program is essentially a low-interest loan from the state that pays your property taxes for you. For many seniors, the fear of owing the government keeps them from applying, but the alternative, falling into a tax sale where private investors can charge up to 18% every 6 months, is far more dangerous. The procedural deductions in Illinois often include publication fees and service of process fees, which can add up to $2,500 before an attorney even looks at the file. This is why the $4,000 figure is so consistent. It is the sum of these small statutory bites taken out of the home's value. In 2026, as home values continue to fluctuate, ensuring that your equalized assessed value, EAV, is accurate is more important than ever to avoid paying taxes on equity that may only exist on paper. In Massachusetts, the situation involves Proposition 212, which usually limits tax increases. However, many towns are now voting for overrides to fund local projects, leading to tax hikes of $1,000 to $4,000. In cities like Melrose and Rutland, residents are facing multi-year override schedules to address structural deficits caused by inflation and rising school costs. For a senior on a fixed income, these overrides can lead to tax increases that are impossible to budget for. There are also ongoing legislative discussions regarding potential taxes on unrealized equity. To counter this, Massachusetts seniors should use the Senior Circuit Breaker tax credit and the Clause 41 local exemption. Together, these can offset significant costs. The Massachusetts Circuit Breaker is particularly unique because it is a refundable credit. This means even if you don't owe state income tax, you can receive a check back from the state to help cover your property taxes. However, like many of these programs, it is not automatic. You must file Schedule CB with your state tax return. If you don't file a tax return because your income is too low, you might miss out on this credit entirely, which is a common tragedy for the lowest income seniors. Furthermore, we must look at the impact of Title 19 and Medicaid planning in conjunction with these tax laws. In many states, if a senior needs to enter a nursing home, the state may place a lien on the home to recoup the costs of care. When this is combined with a pending tax sale, the math becomes incredibly bleak. If the state takes $4,000 in tax sale fees and then Medicaid takes the remaining equity, the family inheritance is wiped out. This is why the defensive filing, the homestead declaration, is so vital. It provides a vested right in a portion of the equity that is often protected from these types of secondary claims. In Massachusetts, an automatic homestead protection of $125,000 exists, but filing a formal declaration can increase that protection to $500,000, a massive difference that costs only a small recording fee. The single most effective filing mentioned at the beginning of this discussion is the Homestead Declaration. In Massachusetts, it is the Declaration of Homestead. In Illinois and Nebraska, the Homestead Exemption, and in Minnesota, the Homestead Classification. While New Jersey's equivalent is structured differently through programs like Anchor and the Senior Freeze, the principle remains the same. This simple filing, which usually costs less than $75, designates the property as your primary residence and provides a statutory layer of protection for your equity. In many of these states, it shields a significant portion of your home's value from certain types of creditors and legal seizures. It is a one-time filing that remains in effect as long as you live in the home, although some senior-specific exemptions require periodic renewal. To reach a deeper understanding of how these mechanisms operate, we must examine the role of tax line aggregators. These are large financial firms that buy thousands of tax certificates across the country. They aren't interested in the houses. They are interested in the 12% to 18% interest rates. However, if the senior can't pay, these firms are perfectly positioned to take the deed. They have automated legal departments that file the necessary paperwork the minute a deadline passes. A senior homeowner, perhaps dealing with health issues or the loss of a spouse, is no match for an automated legal system. This is why the equity theft described by the Supreme Court was so prevalent. It was a high-volume, automated business model. While the court has slowed them down, the recoverable costs we discussed earlier are how these firms still make their profit. They might not get the whole house anymore, but they will certainly get that $4,000 in fees. In 2026, several states are considering even tighter regulations on these aggregators, but for now, the burden of defense remains on the individual homeowner. Let's look at the hidden fifth state more closely, Michigan. While not always in the headlines like Minnesota, Michigan has faced similar battles. The Michigan Supreme Court actually paved the way for the national ruling with cases like Raffaelli, LLC versus Oakland County. In that case, a man lost a property over an initial $841 tax underpayment. The county sold the property for $2,400 and kept all of it. Even after the legal wins, Michigan counties are still struggling with the backlog of surplus claims. If you are a senior in Michigan who lost a property to a tax sale in the last few years, you may be entitled to a surplus, but you must navigate a very specific notice of intent process that most people find confusing. The deadline for these claims often requires filing by July 1st of the year following the sale, a window that closes quickly. To truly protect your equity, you need to think like a defender. The system is designed to reward the proactive and penalize the silent. If you are a senior, or if you have parents who own a home outright, you must conduct an equity audit. This involves 4 specific checks. First, call the county assessor and ask, is there a homestead declaration or senior exemption currently active on this parcel? Do not assume it is there just because you've lived there for 40 years. Second, check the assessment ratio. If the county thinks your house is worth $500,000, but it's actually worth $400,000, you are being overcharged. In 2026, with the real estate market cooling in some areas but taxes remaining high, this discrepancy is common. Third, verify the mailing address for tax notices. Many seniors have their mail forwarded to a seasonal home or a child's house, but the county tax collector often uses a different database than the general county mail. If the tax bill goes to the wrong place, the interest clock starts ticking without you knowing it. Fourth, verify the redemption status if you have ever missed a single payment. Even a small balance can trigger the certificate sale process in states like Nebraska or New Jersey. Another critical area is the third-party notification system. Some counties allow a senior to designate a third party, like an adult child or a trusted attorney, to receive a copy of any delinquent tax notices. This is a free service that can prevent a $4,000 disaster. If the senior misses a bill due to illness or cognitive decline, the designated person gets a backup notice and can step in before the redemption window closes. This is a simple form, often just one page, that can be filed with the tax collector. In 2026, as digital-only billing becomes more common, having a physical paper trail through a third party is more important than ever. In summary, the 2023 Supreme Court ruling was a massive victory, but it was not a complete solution. We have moved from a system of total equity forfeiture to a system of procedural equity erosion. The $4,000 in fees, interest, and administrative deductions is the new front line of this battle. Whether you are in New Jersey facing an abandonment declaration, in Nebraska dealing with recoverable costs, or in Massachusetts fighting an override, the defense remains the same: proactive filing. In Minnesota, the 2024 reforms have created a surplus fund, but if you don't file the claim within the window, that money effectively becomes a donation to the state. We must also consider the impact of shared appreciation mortgage loans and other home equity investment products that are targeting seniors in 2026. These products offer cash upfront in exchange for a slice of your future equity. While they can provide liquidity, they often interact poorly with tax foreclosure laws. If you have one of these loans, a tax lien could trigger a default on the investment agreement, leading to a double hit on your equity. States like Maine have recently signed first-in-the-nation laws to protect homeowners from these products, but in most states, the buyer beware rule still applies. To protect your equity this year, you should first confirm if your state is among those with high procedural fees. Second, ensure you have filed your homestead declaration. Third, review your property tax assessment and consider an abatement application if the assessed value exceeds the actual market value. Fourth, check for senior tax deferral programs that can prevent tax liens from forming. Fifth, consider a single consultation with a real estate or elder law attorney. The typical fee for this is around $300, which is a small price to pay to protect tens of thousands in equity. In many jurisdictions, local bar associations offer free or low-cost senior law days, where you can get these questions answered for free. We must also mention the psychological toll these systems take. Many seniors feel a sense of shame or embarrassment when they fall behind on taxes, leading them to hide the notices rather than seeking help. This silence is exactly what the system relies on to allow the deadlines to pass. If you are a family member, approach this as a financial checkup, not a judgment. The goal is to ensure that the wealth built over a lifetime of work stays where it belongs, with the family, not in the administrative coffers of the county or the pockets of private investors. The mechanisms behind all 5 states are the same. Equity is taken not in a single transaction, but in a slow drain of fees, deductions, and missed filings. Therefore, the defense is a stack of small filings, each commonly costing under $100 that together protect the $4,000 or more that would otherwise disappear into the procedural pipeline. By taking these steps, you can secure the equity you have worked a lifetime to build and ensure it remains a resource for your future. The 2026 tax year brings new challenges, but also new tools like the Stay NJ credits and updated homestead limits in several states. Stay informed, stay proactive, and keep your name on your deed. Subscribe to Golden Seniors Hub for more authentic and detailed updates on protecting your financial well-being. This information is provided to empower you to take control of your most valuable asset. The rules of the game are written in the fine print, but once you know how to read it, you can win. Don't let your hard-earned equity become a recoverable cost for someone else. Take action this week, check your filings, and ensure your home remains yours in every sense of the word. Thank you for watching Golden Seniors Hub.